Hey everybody, Aaron here, and welcome to the latest edition of Movie Battleground. We are once again in the middle of our tournament, and today we have two more competitors fighting it out to move on to the next round. No long introductions, we're just going to go ahead and get into it. Up first, he enters today's match with a 2-1 record, Alex Worden. Alex, how you doing?
What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's been a few months since you've seen my face here in the Battleground arena, but I'm excited to get back into the fold. As Aaron mentioned, I am coming in this with a 2-1 record. I was ever so close to getting into that championship match just until the final month of play of last season. So I'm here to prove, hopefully, that 2-1 record in my short time in the league is no fluke, and I am someone you should watch out for. I, however, am not taking my opponent lightly. I've watched Malcolm's matches. He has been an amazing player, playing some of the top-tier competition and keeping things close. So I know I got a good fight ahead of me, and I'm just looking forward to the battle.
I mean, I could do some BS compliment about Malcolm, but I mean, Alex just did it for me. So, no, I'm kidding. I've said that from day one that his record does not show how good he is. Unfortunately, entering in here with a 1-2 record. However, I have to preface that with he was beaten by Isaac, who is easily one of the best players we have in the league, and Evan DeGraff. Malcolm Lay, how you doing?
Pretty good. Just ready to debate some movies. It's been a while since I've been here as well, but I mean, I'm just ready to go. I mean, like, I've come close to winning. I've won once, so I'm just ready to go. And Alex, I know I've got a good fight in Alex as well, so.
All right, and before we get into it, guys, just to explain the rules once again real fast, we have 4 main round questions to be asked. Each round is going to be 5 minutes long. However, a new rule we're introducing with the tournament, both players have what's called a time round extension. So if there's a round that they know they want to argue on longer, before the opening arguments start, they tell me they want to extend the time. The main round will be extended by 1 minute. The players are not required to use this during the match if they don't want to. It's just if they know they have a round they're going to want to discuss longer, they have that option to pull it out by a minute. Other than that, once the main game ends, if the score ends 3-1 in a player's favor or 2-2, we move on to the speed round. And if it ends 4-0 in one player's favor, that is a knockout victory. Any other questions, guys?
Nope, I'm ready to go.
Really?
All right. And with that, we're going to go into the first question. So obviously we're a little more removed now than when we wrote these questions, but we are fresh off of the Super Bowl. For Malcolm, it's just called an average Sunday. But we are fresh off the Super Bowl. All sorts of trailers dropped, and probably not the best trailer. I don't think anybody's going to say it's the best movie, but the most impressive feat pulled off during the Super Bowl was the dropping of the new movie Cloverfield Paradox's trailer, and then the reveal that the movie would be dropping on Netflix once the Super Bowl had ended. Now, obviously, the movie received, I'll be nice and say, mixed reviews. And, this was clearly a marketing gimmick to try and push the film and push Netflix's reputation as a film distribution company. But with that being said, this is a big name and previously successful franchise taking the move to Netflix. That included with filmmakers like Martin Scorsese or Gareth Evans, or even Duncan Jones' new movie comes out this year, with names moving to production through Netflix. We decided to ask the question, what franchise should move out of theaters and onto the Netflix platform for future installments like Cloverfield has, or like Cloverfield seemingly has? I don't know the exact minute details of that deal, but we're assuming they're not going to go back into theaters after moving to Netflix. It's going to stay there for the 4th film, Overlord, or whatever they changed that title to in the end. So with that, because he does have the better record coming into this, Alex is going to go first on the first round.
All right.
And go ahead with your opening arguments.
Okay. Now, I, like many people, and as Aaron just pointed out, I was one of the many people shocked when we saw that trailer for Cloverfield Paradox and then the big reveal that it would be airing right after the film. In watching that movie and then reading up about what went into the film jumping to Netflix, it really came off as a situation where the studio Paramount just didn't have faith to release that movie theatrically because they thought they would take a loss on it, whereas selling it to Netflix, they can sell it for an even cost. So when I think of movies and big name franchises that should move to Netflix, I'm thinking of situations where a studio knows they are in a losing situation keeping this franchise on the books, but if they move it to a situation like Netflix where they can cover the production and distribution costs, it makes an even keel. That to me screams the Alien franchise. This is a series of movies that has died twice already, both with its original iterations in the 90s and the Alien vs. Predator series in the mid-2000s. This franchise has been all over the place tonally, many different directors and writers and producers having many different interpretations of the xenomorphs. But if you move to the Netflix model where you have restricted budgets that require you to focus on storytelling and characters to make a successful film, it would do wonders for the Alien franchise, which I'll get to more in a little bit.
All right, good opening statement. Malcolm, you're up.
Right, when I was thinking of movies that should move from theaters to go to Netflix, I'm thinking more along the lines of movies that were always low budget and haven't really been financially successful at the box office at all. Like the Alien movies, they've been great financially at the box office. So, I mean, there's no reason in moving them to Netflix. But the Medea movies, they really haven't. They've been declining box office wise since they've come out, and like the recent one, Boo 2, it only made $48 million worldwide. So that and they're so low budget that they easily can be financed by Netflix. So that's my reason for choosing Medea.
All right, good opening arguments, guys. Once again, you have 5 minutes on the clock. Time starts when you begin speaking.
Okay. To one specific point that Malcolm just made about the films not having been successful in cinemas and declining, it's tenfold the problem with the Alien franchise. As the series has gone on, the budgets have been inflating and inflating and inflating, but the returns have been diminishing. The most recent example being Alien Covenant, a film that was made for, after marketing costs, well over $200 million, and yet worldwide only grossed 280, 290. Whereas the Medea films, they're produced on a much smaller scale of budgets. Similar thing in the lines of starting off with $5 million in Diary of a Mad Black Woman up to $25 million with Boo 2. Now, the thing is, they still get returns. They're making back double or triple their budgets with very little marketing costs needed other than just one quick trailer. Whereas the Alien franchise films, when they come out, you see them everywhere. You see them in posters. You see them in television commercials. You see them in trailers. You see them on fast food cups. You see them in billboards everywhere. Fox spends millions and millions, sometimes more than the budget of the film making itself, to get this film on people's eyes, and yet nobody goes to see them anymore because the quality has been diminishing for decades now. After the first two films in the franchise, they have been declining since day one, whether it's the studio interference on the third film from David Fincher, the complete mishmash of writer versus director in the fourth film, the Alien versus Predator films having tonally no reason to exist other than to be that fun mashup, which we'd already been getting for a decade in comics, and then the two most recent films where it's very clear Ridley Scott's not interested in getting us to the end point of the Alien. He's interested in getting us to the point of seeing where the world comes from and expanding on that, and yet then shoehorning the aliens in at studio request. These films have made no sense in these hands for the past 20 years, whereas if you move it to a platform like Netflix, where even at a bright level, your best budget is going to be $90 million a film, that's way less than what they've been making these films for the past few years. So you have to scale back on production, and to make a good movie, you have to up the storytelling content. You have to focus more on your characters, and you have to make the appearance of the alien more impactful, which is what the hope would be in moving this franchise to Netflix. Make a smaller film, make a more intimate horror alien sci-fi film so that the appearance of the alien creatures means more when you finally see them popping up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, the Alien movies, I mean, like, yes, they may need a bigger budget, but Netflix, they've never really I mean, Bright's probably the biggest budget thing they've probably done recently, and with the reviews that got, it didn't work. And I mean, Cloverfield just showed that science fiction on a small scale, like, just doesn't work. I mean, like, even though, yes, the stories have been declining and stuff, but like the Alien ones, like you might not get, well, yeah, while big name stars may not be necessary for the Alien movies, but if you want to get like Sigourney Weaver back or Michael Fassbender or even Ridley Scott as director, then they might not be willing to do it for a smaller thing if they don't know if they'll watch. But with the Medea movies, they're critically, they're not great. I mean, they've they've all had consistently low scores on Rotten Tomatoes since they've come out. But I mean, the audience score shows that people are still willing to watch them. But with some reviews, some people might not be willing to pay like $10 views to go to the cinema to see it. So they'll probably be willing to watch it more, watching on Netflix. And with the exception of Tyler Perry, most of the actors aren't well known, so you can easily get them to come back to do a movie on for a smaller platform.
I would disagree with that. The best example would be one of his more recent films, I Can Do Bad All By Myself, where he got Taraji P. Henson to come back to the film franchise and jumped into it, and she gave an amazing performance in that film. The thing is, too, you brought up the fact of bringing back the classic people who have worked on the franchise for years, get Ridley Scott back in the Aliens fold, get Sigourney Weaver back, bring back Michael Fassbender. I don't think any of these people are really interested in coming back at this point other than to make the money from Fox. They become creatively stagnant. You can tell in that second film that he was in, the character of David, played by Michael Fassbender, is just way too over the top because he knows he's making $20 million for this movie. Sigourney Weaver was only interested in coming back for Neil Blomkamp's version of Alien 5, or rather a better version of Alien 3, until the studio cut it because of budgetary concerns. But if you move it to a platform like Netflix where they have to restrict the budget and focus more on the storytelling, setting, and the characters.
All right, and that is time on that round. Alex, you are up first for closing, so go ahead.
Okay. The closing point, I just want to kind of finish my last point in that if you, again, bring the Alien franchise to Netflix, you're bringing a big name to Netflix. The Alien franchise is still very well known and very well recognized. It's failing at Fox at the studio distribution level because they're throwing millions and millions and millions at making the movie and not caring about the story. If you move it to Netflix, where you have to be more budget tight and focus on the storytelling and the characters and make the creature impactful, the xenomorph, Alien can be a success on Netflix, revitalize the franchise, and bring that shock value similar to Cloverfield of, holy crap, the next one's on Netflix, I'm signing up right now if I haven't already. The Medea films are working in theaters every year because they're produced for small budgets. They're made for a very specific audience who are part of a specific culture, not one that I will claim I'm part of, but ones who don't often go out to the theater. So the Medea movies, they relate to them. The stories in the Medea movies are relatable to a certain culture of people in America from the South that will go see these movies consistently in theaters every year, which is why they can make a movie for $25 million, but they'll guarantee to get their returns back and more on a small budget in order to keep pumping out movies every year to make an overall gross of the franchise. Whereas with Alien, that's been failing year on year, and they really need something different to revitalize that property, which Netflix would be a great solution for.
All right, and Malcolm, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean, okay, my closing thoughts is, like, because the Medea movies are for a specific culture, people may be willing to go to cinemas for them, but I mean, even on Netflix, they'll probably work just the same. The Alien movies, they're movies that people really like to see on the big screen, and that a small screen may not do it justice. And I mean, if you want to get big name stars, you might not be willing to get them. You may get some that may want to, and I mean, thing is, most of the Alien movies, like, critically, they've had about an even keel when it comes to Rotten Tomato scores. Like, but the critics and fans, they seem to have that a really good rating. So that's why I think Medea is the one that best should be on Netflix.
All right. Good first round, guys. Most of the talk, a lot of the numbers, I was kind of fact checking. The one thing is just comparing latest installments to installments before. Both of these franchises are on a bit of a downward curve. Compared to Prometheus's $403 million pull on a production budget of $125 million, Alien Covenant only pulled in $231 million worldwide on a $97 million budget, so there was a definite decrease there. Meanwhile, comparing Boo 2 to Boo, both movies cost $20 million to make. However, Boo earned $73 million at the worldwide box office, whereas Boo 2 earned $47 million at the worldwide box office. Also, I just found this to be an interesting fact. If you compare the domestic numbers to the worldwide numbers, they change by the thousands of dollars. Literally, all these movies make is their money in America. That's insane. And the other thing was talking about budgets. Like I said, the last Alien movie was made for $97 million. Compare that to what people would assume is Netflix's biggest budget film now, Bright, that was made for $90 million. So they have played in and around that range. And I'm pretty sure the new Martin Scorsese film is going to be over $100 million on production budget. So they can play in that game if they need to. Overall, it was a solid round. A bit of a slow start. There wasn't really a lot of attack against the other movie, so I was listening at that point more to the defense of why the move to Netflix would help. And I think on that front, Alex did a better job of selling me on why the move to Netflix could potentially help the franchise, whereas Malcolm seemed to be more saying, yeah, they do good in theaters, but they can move to Netflix and not really see any downward change. Whereas Alex was making the pitch of moving it to Netflix can help improve it in this, and this, and I think that's what gets him the point in this round. But a good start for both of you guys.
All right.
All right, and with that, we're going to move into question number 2. What is the worst movie starring Melissa McCarthy? And with that, we're going to go to Malcolm first for opening arguments. Go ahead.
Okay, for worst movie of worst movie starring Melissa McCarthy, I went for 2016's The Boss. It was a completely terrible movie. The direction seemed to be a lost, and it was only the second movie that the director did when he collaborated with Melissa McCarthy, and first was Tammy, and the acting was cringy, and that's why I sort of picked it as the worst.
All right, and Alex, go ahead.
See, for me, I look at Melissa McCarthy's filmography, and there's so many options, unfortunately. This woman has not had a good break as a featured top-line player in a film, but I want to go back to one of her first examples of being a top-line player in a film and why it's one of her worst films, and that's 2013's Identity Thief, a movie where she plays a character who steals the identity of a mild-mannered businessman played by Jason Bateman, who ultimately ends up being a sort of buddy movie and road trip movie that goes off the rails really early on and doesn't recover. It's the beginning of the Melissa McCarthy syndrome of what I like to call fat girl fall down, go boom, funny movie, which really isn't that funny and then very unfortunate in that sense, in that her characters are all of the same template up until The Boss, and that with Identity Thief, it's the start of a downward trend of her career that would take her a few years to recover from, and really just a black mark on her as an actress altogether if you look at her overall work as in both television and film.
Okay, and with that, we are going to go ahead and go into the main round. Once again, you guys are going to have 5 minutes on the clock. Time starts when one of you begins speaking.
Okay, so the one thing I'd like to consider in this case is not only the Melissa McCarthy starring factor, but also who she has to work with in the film. In The Boss, she's got a lot of great co-stars in this movie. She actually has Kristen Shaw, Kristen Bell, Cedric Yarborough, and Peter Dinklage, who, spoiler alert, plays her business rival / former lover. And he's actually really funny in this movie. Then again, it's Peter Dinklage. There's not much he's not actually great in. Whereas in Identity Thief, you get Jason Bateman. And that's really all you get. It's Jason Bateman from the era before the Arrested Development revival, where he was kind of floating around Hollywood, the Horrible Bosses time, where he was playing the straight man and everything and not really getting a chance to really show his chops. And he was used to playing off of other people's zaniness. And in this film, you can tell he really didn't care. And it really shines through. It's the Melissa McCarthy show through and through, but the writing of the characters and the situation that they're in just doesn't lend well to being a Melissa McCarthy vehicle. Whereas in The Boss, she's satirizing the Martha Stewart or Rachel Ray type of successful businesswoman who makes her money on home improvement. And really, she's playing a bitch. You don't really get that from Melissa McCarthy in any previous roles. She's playing an outright despicable person, and she's great at it. There's several moments in that movie where you can't help but just get a chuckle out of it because she's so good at playing a bad person. Whereas in Identity Thief, it's all that fat girl fall down, go boom comedy. The fact that she's taking pratfalls and she's doing slapstick, and it's not really helping sell her character. It's just redoing Chris Farley's shtick from the 90s as a female. It's kind of cheap and lazy in that respect, and it doesn't get over very well.
Look, I mean, with Identity Thief, I mean, yeah, I mean, the comedy didn't work, but I mean, there was some great moments in the movie. Like, there's a lot of emotional moments, like the change in her character to the end, where she clearly regrets stealing the identity. And so much, and I thought the chemistry with Jason Bateman was perfect. And like, well, yeah, Identity Thief was disliked by the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, but at least over 50% of the fans did enjoy it. And it did make at least $174 million at the box office. Compare that to The Boss, that was both critics and fans' scores were both under 50%, and like it still was a relative success at the box office with 78 million. And the thing is, with Peter Dinklage and even Kristen Bell and some of the other actors, like, some of the acting was cringy. The writing was terrible in The Boss. It was completely unfunny. And like, as I said in my opening, Ben Falcone's directing, like, with Tammy, which is the other one that he did with McCarthy, like, both of them have had pretty much equal scores on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's just so terrible. There's no good moments in The Boss. Like, I mean, like, yes, she was playing a bitch, but like, there wasn't anything funny about that.
Well, that's the thing. I thought it was perfectly serviceable. It's a different type of character for her. A character that, again, she's bad. She's evil. She's basically Cruella de Vil at points at her very worst, and she's great in that role. Whereas, and you brought up the fact, too, Ben Falcone, the fact that it's her husband. It makes the film a family affair. There's even a great performance with her daughter playing a younger version of her character, Vivian Falcone. She's actually really good in it. A lot of the kid actors in this movie are playing off of Melissa McCarthy's improv skill, and they're doing a very good job. They're keeping up with her at points. Whereas in Identity Thief, there are moments in that film where you feel like Jason Bateman and Melissa McCarthy are not on the same wavelength as comedians, kind of bumbling back and forth, and their chemistry gets so awkward at points that you just want to sit there with your hand in your face going, why did I pay $10 to see this movie? The ending of her redemption feels forced. It feels contrived. You can see it coming from the very beginning of the film, whereas in The Boss, you don't really see her getting that redemption at the end because she starts off as such a horrible person, so that when it builds up to it, you kind of feel like it's earned. But it comes back to the fact that she's got a good supporting cast to play off of, and there are genuine moments in that movie that make me laugh. In particular, the scene where the two troops of Girl Scouts end up fighting each other in the middle of a street. That was just ridiculousness on a whole other level that I happened to just sit there chuckling my head off for a good 5 minutes going, what am I watching? This should be in an Anchorman movie. This is ridiculous. I love it. Whereas Identity Thief, you don't really get those moments. Everything feels forced. Everything feels contrived. Everything feels like you've seen it before, and it's partly because of her filmography. More films like Tammy and Spy that take the fat girl fall down, go boom comedy to another level because they're trying to one-up everything she did in Identity Thief, setting up this bad style of comedy that would take her a few years to kind of come out of and evolve into something like The Boss, where she can wrap a character around it and at least be serviceable in the role.
All right, guys, that is going to be time on the round. Malcolm, you were up first for closing arguments, so go ahead.
Look, The Boss is the worst Melissa McCarthy movie because, like, both critics and fans on Modern Mose, both of them think that it's completely terrible. I mean, it was unfunny. The fight scene was a rip-off of Anchorman. And with Identity Thief, it was like it was a good movie. Like, there was lots of emotion in it, and like to see the redemption, it was great to see, and it wasn't terrible at all, and it made me laugh more than The Boss. And with The Boss, a lot of the writing, directing, and some of the usually great actors like Peter Dinklage and Christian Bale, their acting was cringy at times as well. And yeah, and that's why I think The Boss is the worst movie.
All right, and Alex, go ahead for closing arguments.
All right, well, just to kind of counter those points about the writing and directing being poor and the actors being cringy, it's a movie where you can tell that behind the scenes, these people were probably having a lot of fun making the movie because they like to be outward. They are very explicit. They're not holding anything back or trying to be subdued in their performances. They're leaving everything on camera, just having fun and catching scenes in between, which are very well played. Whereas with Identity Thief, you can tell at the beginning of the movie, they're trying, and they're trying to make something. But between Melissa McCarthy's choices in her comedic style, Jason Bateman's straight man character, where you can tell he's actually really bored in the making of the film because of the era he's in and the fact that he's so sick of playing straight man roles, and just the overall lazy storytelling in Identity Thief, it fails in every aspect, especially as a first true starring vehicle from Melissa McCarthy. Whereas The Boss, it takes an evolution of her character where it gives her something to wrap her teeth around and having to play more of a villain and then building up on that to sort of redeem her through the film. In Identity Thief, they try to convey that, but they're failing miserably because you kind of can't help but root for her poor downtrodden character. And it was the setup of future films like Tammy and Spy, where that's pretty much the exact same role she played for 2 years plus up until The Boss, where she really just got to play a despicable character, took it to the hilt, and just ran with it and had a lot of fun making it. Identity Thief is boring at its best points and cringeworthy at its worst. The Boss has some legitimately funny moments, great cast. Cedric Yarborough especially is awesome playing her assistant. Peter Dinklage as her ex-lover is hilarious. And honestly, give the movie a second chance if you have seen it, or give it a chance if you never have. You might find a couple of enjoyable things. Identity Thief, just leave it in your Netflix queue and don't ever look at it.
All right. Once again, another good round, guys. Just to run down a couple of quick things, because talked about in the round was Rotten Tomatoes scores and box office to compare box office of the two films. Identity Thief, obviously, all these numbers are without me doing attempted extra math to make it look more realistic. But production budget was $35 million, and it made $174 million. The worldwide box office. Whereas The Boss had a production budget of $29 million and made $78.8. So it was slightly less successful. In terms of critical response, Identity Thief had a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score, 53% audience score, and The Boss had a 22% critic score and 38% audience score. And then the final one was Malcolm compared The Boss to Ben Falcone's other movie, Tammy, which had a 24% critic score, 36% audience score. So they do have similar scores on Rotten Tomatoes. So that is correct when you made that statement. And again, I have to preface on the show, every time Rotten Tomatoes is brought up, it is not the end-all, be-all of reviews. It's just the easiest aggregator to go to.
Yeah.
With that being said, once again, I'm going to have to give this one to Alex just because I think he did a really good job of defending The Boss. I don't know whether or not he did enjoy the movie or not, but he did a good job on selling me that he enjoyed it enough. So I'm going to give him the point on that.
Actually, I'll be honest. I did, at points, enjoy The Boss. There's one scene in particular with Cedric Yarborough screaming, "Who got my baseball?" It's actually, it gets me every time I see it. It's actually really good.
All right, guys. So right now the score is 2-0 in Alex's favor. However, Malcolm still has some shots to get back in here and get some points. And with that, we're going to move on to the third question. So this weekend, there's a big movie coming out called Black Panther, and we're not going to talk about it right now. Instead, there's another movie coming out in America. It's called Early Man, and it's being released by an animation studio named Aardman Animation. And you're probably asking me, well, who the hell is Aardman Animation? Because you probably haven't heard of them. They make a lot of stop-motion type animated films. They've worked in co-production with DreamWorks a lot, and they've done co-productions with other studios as well. And so I thought, let's shine a light on one of the smaller studios out there and let these guys argue out what is the best movie made by Aardman Animation. And Alex, you are up first. Go ahead.
All right. Well, for me, when I think of Aardman Animation, I do think of Malcolm's Topic first. But I also think of a particular movie from the year 2000, which started the debate of should there be a Best Animated Feature at the Oscars? And that movie is Chicken Run, a movie that speaks volumes if you've ever seen it, and not only how funny it is and how well made it is as a stop-motion film, but the heart of the movie. It's got great performances, a great Mel Gibson performance, but I'm not going to touch on that because I know he's a touchy subject to a lot of people. But it's so crisp and so well done that back in the year 2000, it started that argument of should we have a Best Animated Feature at the Oscars? Not just because of Pixar and the work they're doing, but because of how great this movie was, and it paid fruit a couple years later. This is one of those movies that you can go back and rewatch anytime, no matter what mood you're in, and it's going to uplift you and make you laugh, and it's a movie for all ages that I think has mass appeal that everyone should enjoy, unless you literally have no soul. If you don't, well, you're a robot. That's fine, but we'll get into that at a later time. This movie is perfect. It's in so many ways, and it's really something you should see if you've never seen it.
All right, and with that, Malcolm, go ahead.
Well, Alex did allude to it. The movie I'm going to be talking about is the movie that did win Best Animated Oscar, and that was Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Rare Rabbit. I mean, it took the characters and put them in a different sort of situation than what they have never done before in their shorts, and like to get in some great British talent and the original actors. It was just a great movie.
All right, and with that, we're going to go on to the main round. Like, as always, 5 minutes on the clock when you guys begin speaking.
All right. Well, here's the thing. When I think of Wallace and Gromit, I don't think of Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I think of the original shorts and the original short films and the short-lived television skits. When I think of Chicken Run, I think of Aardman Animation's Best Animated Feature because it set the bar so high for this studio, jumping from the small screen and short features into feature-length production. The animation style they used and the techniques they used in that film looked crisp. They looked clean. It didn't look like it was stop motion. It looked like it was something Pixar would have created in computer and felt so polished and so well done. The voice cast in this movie was phenomenal, and at the time had a smaller cast aside from Mel Gibson that you wouldn't really think would be in animated films. Shout outs to their lead actor, Julia Savahar. If that's her name, I'm forgiving me. You can look it up. But she is amazing in the lead role of Ginger, playing a character who teaches an ultimately great life lesson of never give up. Failure is giving up. You only fail if you give up. Constantly in her search to get out of her chicken coop, get out of that farm, and go off and explore the wide world. And in this movie, that's a message that's impactful to anyone, regardless of your race, gender, creed, religion, or species, really, in this case with a chicken. It also sparked that debate I talked about, where back in the year 2000, this movie was so well received by critics and animation heads, it started the debate of, we should have a Best Animated Feature category at the Oscars because there's so many different types of great animation alongside the work of Pixar and the continued work of Disney and Fox's hand-drawn houses that it really should be a category we're acknowledging. Whereas the Wallace and Gromit movie, it's boring at its best. I go back and rewatch that, and I only need to see it once. Ray Fiennes and Helen Bonham Carter jump in as two of the lead roles. They're boring at their worst points. They seem disinterested in being there. They're not giving anything extra to their vocal performance. Whereas in Chicken Run, you get Mel Gibson really giving it his all to give a great vocal performance, and Imelda Staunton playing the farm wife who's just menacing in every scene she's in. And with the work she'd go on to do later in the mid-2000s, making her name in Hollywood, this is really the launching off point for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, Wallace and Gromit is not by far boring. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it, and I mean, I rewatched it for the purpose of the argument, and I still found enjoyment in it. Um, to they did what I didn't think they could, is they brought back the original voice actor for Wallace, Peter Sellers. I mean, he came back to play the role, and Helena and Bonham Carter, and well, they were just perfect. Um, with Chicken Run, like, it was literally a chicken version of The Great Escape. I've seen it's been seen before. Well, yes, what Wallace and Gromit do take on the whole like werewolf motif, but they changed it up enough so that to put some heart in it with and spoiler alert, Wallace being the rear rabbit, and Gromit not what and Gromit realizing it and not wanting to hurt him, and tried everything to save him humanely. And like in Chicken Run, I mean, I might have to rewatch it, but the first time I ever watched it was I just found it boring and predictable at times. And like the voice cast, like Imelda Staunton played exactly the same sort of role as what she did later as Dolores Umbridge in Harry Potter. Like most of her roles that I know her from are villain roles, and
Yeah.
it's just
Well, that's the thing,
same.
though. If you look at what Imelda Staunton did as her character, the farmer's wife in this movie, it led to her getting the performance of Dolores Umbridge in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Correct me, I'm not the biggest Harry Potter fan. At the same time, though, casting aside, it comes down to me for two factors. One, the animation quality. With Chicken Run, they had to throw all their eggs in to prove that this can work on a big screen feature level, and they did it. Everything looks crisp, everything looks clean. There's very few breaks in the animation scene to scene other than the noticeable needed to be for puppetry, but it looks like something that ultimately is an art style, which later would be adopted. Look at the upcoming Isle of Dogs from Wes Anderson. He's using those same techniques and it looks great. Or the upcoming Into the Spider-Verse from Sony. They're adopting that style into computer animation and it looks good. Whereas with Wallace and Gromit, it feels like they knew they were going to make money on the movie because these are two known characters, so they let the animation slip a little bit. There's a couple of moments in the movie where the animation does stutter, and you can tell it wasn't as crisply edited together to get those scenes moving, and it kind of jars you out. The other argument of it's because of this movie and the work of Pixar that we have the best animated feature category, because people had to bring the conversation up of these movies are so good, they're not quite in the best feature argument, but they need their own recognition. Whereas, yes, Wallace and Gromit won Best Animated Feature. Personally, I feel it's the weakest of the three films from that year that were nominated, alongside Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride, which is a superior stop-motion film, and the amazing Howl's Moving Castle.
All right, and Alex, you are up first for closing, so go ahead.
All right. Well, just to finish my last point there about the film's recognition, yeah, it made more money at the box office, but that's because it's a known property that had buzz going into it. And whereas Chicken Run was a completely original premise and feature for Aardman Animation, and really did make its money back and was a success. And in terms of it, Wallace and Gromit winning Best Animated Feature the year it came out, it is the weakest of the three films that got nominated that year, alongside Tim Burton's The Corpse Bride and Howl's Moving Castle by Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, which very well could be their finest film if you're a fan of their work. Overall, for me, Wallace and Gromit Curse of the Were-Rabbit is actually lesser than the original shorts done by the team at Aardman, and the original shorts just stand the test of time. This is just an addendum to it. Whereas Chicken Run is something wholly good, wholly original, wholly entertaining, that if you've never seen it, you should go back and watch, because it really proves the quality of what Aardman Animation can do when they bring their A game to a feature like they have something to lose. Whereas with Wallace and Gromit, there was nothing on the line for them as a studio. They were just making an extended version of the show. Chicken Run was them going out and saying, we're here, we can make a feature-length film, and you will love it. And we did. People loved it. I loved it. And if you've never seen it, you should watch it because you will love it.
All right. And Malcolm, go ahead.
Well, Wallace and Gromit was incredible. It brought back a lot of the nostalgia factor and quirkiness of the shorts, and like all the actors were perfect. The original actor for Wallace was perfect, and it was in kind of an original take on the whole werewolf stories from the past. And Chicken Run was not wholly original. It was a chicken version of the classic Steve McQueen movie, The Great Escape, and like the voice cast was, yeah, it was pretty much what they've normally done before, or what they will go on to do later in their career. And I mean, and it's just boring. Yeah.
All right, guys. Once again, another good round. Just some quick kind of fact things to throw out there. In terms of success, once again, in terms of box office success, Chicken Run grossed $224 million on a $45 million budget. Wallace and Gromit grossed $192 million on a $30 million budget. In terms of critical success, Chicken Run is a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. Walt and Gromit is a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. So they're very close in terms of financial and critical success. Other things I'm going to give, I believe the name of the actress that leads Chicken Run is pronounced Julia Sawalha. Swallow?
Yeah.
Like it's just one Swallow.
Sawalha, yeah.
We tried. And then the other thing was, just to fact check the other things brought up, Alex, you were correct. Imelda Staunton appears in 2 Harry Potter films. Her first appearance was Order of the Phoenix. The other appearance was in Deathly Hallows Part 1. And then, of course, you addressed it. The Best Animated Feature Film category of 2005 was only 3 films. Wallace and Gromit won over Howl's Moving Castle and Corpse Bride. In terms of arguments, I think this round was actually the best from both of you guys. Both of you guys did a really, really great job defending your films. Alex talked about the fact that his inspired its own, or helped inspire its own category within the Oscars. He talked about the performances given by the cast. He talked about the fact that the animation style, from the time that it's from, looked polished and well done and inspired an art style that we're still seeing in films today. Malcolm talked about the fact that this was kind of a feature film blow up of the shorts that it's based on, and it does it successfully and doesn't always wear out its welcome, that it keeps you entertained the entire time, and that it takes a werewolf story and kind of twists it in a way that makes the movie enjoyable and seem a little more original than you may think with the initial take that it could be going for. However, I'm going to have to give the point to Alex again on this one, because Malcolm's only real attack against Chicken Run was the fact that it did kind of jack the story from The Great Escape, whereas Alex talked more about the fact that in terms of animation compared to Chicken Run, it may look a little choppier at times, and the fact that just because it's a bigger feature-length version of the shorts doesn't always mean it holds up and compares against them. Maybe it's better formatted for the short run length. And I just think he had a little more against it than Malcolm had against Chicken Run. But again, I think that's easily the best round from both of you guys. But going into the 4th round, the score is 3-0. So here's where we're at. If Alex gets this point, it is a knockout elimination. If Malcolm can pull the point out here, it's going to be 3-1, and we will move into the speed round.
All right. I will preemptively note as well, for this round, I will go ahead and ask for the time extension, just to make things more interesting.
You want to use it? All right.
Let's do it.
All right. Malcolm, did you want to use yours as well? Because we can double them up if you guys wanted to. Did you want to use yours, or do you want to say, or not use it at all?
I'll just leave it.
All right. So we're going to go to 6 minutes on this round. All right. So the question is, what is the worst sequel in a good franchise? A franchise that is generally, for the most part, critically and fan-wise well-received, but it's got that one bad egg, that one bad entry. What is that film? And Malcolm, we're going to go ahead and start with you on this one. What is the worst sequel in a good franchise?
Well, I was thinking really hard about this, because it's one of those ones that, when you think of franchise, you generally think of quite often an ongoing saga. So I've thought really hard, and so I just thought, well, I'll go for this one, because I'll go for Amazing Spider-Man 2, because this is what destroyed the Spider-Man franchise. Second, led to it Marvel having to take it back and resurrect it and make it better. Like this was terrible by far, because I mean, Jamie Foxx was terrible as the villain. He really was not believable, and like the romance that Andrew and Emma had in the first one, it was completely flipped on its head and just became unbelievable in the second one. And I'd much rather watch Spider-Man 3 10 times more than having to revisit The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is why I picked it.
All right, and Alex, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just going to flat out say my movie, The Godfather Part 3. When you think of this movie, you think of the black stain on one of the greatest cinematic franchises of all time. The first two films, so amazing, so iconic, great acting, great settings, great action, great drama, great writing, great music, great everything throughout them. The third film throws it all out the window. It is just so poorly made. It's so poorly considered in its inception, in the fact that really, when you watch this movie, it's an excuse for Francis Ford Coppola to take his friends and family on a vacation to Italy for 3 months, making a movie. Whereas the first two films are so tight. Their length of film may be deceiving on that, but the storytelling in those films is not a single moment wasted. The Godfather Part 3 is a waste from beginning to end. And when you think of it in comparison to the other two films in the franchise, it makes them lesser. And that's the sad part. You're ruining one of the greatest stories, one of the greatest cinematic families for the sake of a vacation. And that is just complete no-go.
All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and move into the main argument. Like was said at the beginning of the round, Alex went ahead and used his time extension, so you guys are going to have 6 minutes on the clock to argue this one out. Time starts when someone begins speaking.
Okay, I have one thing to mention, and this is more just a premise of the question thing, not questioning the allotment of this answer. But when I think of The Amazing Spider-Man, I don't think of it as part of the overarching Sony-produced Spider-Man films. I think of it as just one part of a duology of The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And to me, when you look at the two films, both critically and financially, in comparison to the three films before, these are not two good movies. This is a duology of films that was meant to grow into a larger franchise, but they did not get off to a great start. The first film, Amazing Spider-Man itself, is not good, and the sequel is just continuing the trend. Whereas with the Godfather films, the first two are so universally loved. They're so well made. Personally, they're two of my top 25 films of all time. But this third movie is just so bad in its execution, its acting, its storytelling, its direction, that it just puts a black stain on the franchise. It ruins your memories of pieces of the original two films by wasting characters, not bringing back characters in certain cases, like Robert Duvall's Tom Hagen, and really just wasting all the potential that that franchise had in continuing its story. Whereas The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it's continuing off the foot of the first film in that franchise, which itself was not a good movie. I wouldn't even go so far as to say it's a fair movie. It is poor at very best. And the continuation should have been expected to be poor. And it was. It made money because it's a Spider-Man movie, but that's still hinging off the nostalgia of the first three films made by Sam Raimi. Whereas The Godfather had a 16-year gap between the second and third films, all that time building up what could have happened to these characters, and this is the best they could have come up with. This is just horrible. It makes you just want to forget you ever watched it. Whereas Amazing Spider-Man 2, you should just be sitting there going, well, what did you expect? This is the sequel to Amazing Spider-Man.
You will, like, with Godfather Part 3, on Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't, I mean, all that, it's got a moderate success on there, because it's got a 67% of critics that actually do like it, and fans 78%. And I feel with Godfather Part 3, it didn't actually put that much of a black stain on it, because it was planned to be the final movie. So I mean, like, even if it didn't really kill anything, like Spider-Man 2, it killed the franchise a second time, and they couldn't. Marvel decided to step in and take control and steer it in the right direction.
Okay.
And I mean, as the villain, Dane DeHaan was just terrible. I mean, the acting performances in Godfather Part 3 were good on the most part. Like, yes, there was a few bit.
Oh. Oh, no. Here's the thing. With The Godfather Part 3, you're throwing so many people at this film that they either are just so boring, like Sofia Coppola, who really should have had nothing to do with the production of this movie, let alone have a featured top billing starring role as Michael's daughter. Or you've got someone like Andy Garcia, a guy who's got all the potential in the world to be a great actor, and yet he's biting people's ears off in the first 20 minutes of the film. You've got Joe Manganiello, who is great as Fat Tony on The Simpsons and had already established himself at that point. And yet in this film, he's executing hits on people by having a helicopter fly outside of the 30th story of an casino hotel, executing mobsters, some of whom are just hiding in corners and not acting like mobsters. The performances in this film are either completely over the top at their very worst, like Pacino in most of his scenes, or they're just flatline, like Sophia's scenes. Whereas with Amazing Spider-Man 2, they're trying. They're at least trying. These are all young actors for the most part, like Dane DeHaan, who really only had one major feature role at that point in Chronicle, where he was great. This one, he didn't have the right script to go ahead with, but he still gave a serviceable performance considering the material he was given. Jamie Foxx, he's having fun in the role of Electro. You can tell it from his very first scene when he's got the goofy wig and the gap teeth in him. He's got that shit-eating grin on his face walking down the street of, yeah, I'm in a Spider-Man movie for once, and I'm making $25 million for doing this shit. He's actually having fun in the role. And the romance between Andrew and Emma as Peter and Gwen, it actually is better in this movie. The first film, it feels like a hackneyed high school romance out of Twilight, which was fresh on people's minds. In this film, they're actually playing up the drama a little bit, and I think their chemistry shows a little bit better, having dated for 2 years at the time. They're naturally playing off each other back and forth a little bit better, and their scenes are actually serviceable and completely watchable. You actually kind of feel bad when Gwen dies in the film, spoiler alert, where you can see the chemistry between them. He's really wrenching over this, thinking of what would happen to Emma if this happened in real life. Whereas in The Godfather, when Mary dies on the steps of the church, of the opera hall at the end in Michael's arms, his screams just feel like, oh my God, this actually makes the screams of Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith sound like their actual emotion. He does not give a shit. No one gives a shit in The Godfather Part 3. They made the movie for the sake of going on a vacation to Italy and getting some scouting for the purpose of an excuse, a write-off. Coppola didn't care. Pacino didn't care. No one involved in making the movie cared, and it shows through and through. It coasted by on its legacy, but in the years since, people have come back to that movie and said, holy fuck, what were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it was just... I found it was shades worse than the first
Okay,
one.
and that's gonna have to be time.
Yep.
All right. Final arguments are up. Malcolm, you're up first. Go ahead.
Look, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was the worst one in the Spider-Man franchise. Whether you want to consider the first three as part of the same franchise or separate, it's up to you. I mean, I do. This it killed the franchise a second time, and the other Spider-Man movies that were planned, like Sinister Six, etc., were cancelled, and Marvel took the franchise back. Godfather Part 3, there wasn't going to be any more even. So I mean, it wasn't so much a ruin as just the final movie, and that could be part of the reason why some of the actors may not have cared, because they knew that there wasn't going to be any other movies afterwards anyway. And for the time, the box office of Godfather Part 3 was 136 million, which is decent for the 90s anyway. So that's why Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the worst movie in the franchise.
All right, and Alex, go ahead.
I go back to my point of the premise of the question in that I don't feel that Amazing Spider-Man 2 is part of the same franchise as the original Raimi films. It is part of what would become a duology, but is still somewhat being extended, with Sony still trying to experiment with the Spider-Man property, in that they're making a Venom movie coming out this fall. They're going to be making a Black Cat and Silver Sable movie, and they are continuing their legacy of expanded universe Spider-Man films. Whether or not the MCU is involved completely, it's between Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal. Whereas with the Godfather movies, little known fact, they actually did consider making more movies after this. There was consideration of making a film centered around Andy Garcia's character, Vincent, and how he takes over the Corleone family. But the reception to this movie and how it continued the Godfather story put the brakes on that the second people saw the film. It became the final film because it was very clear from the moment people saw this movie, they didn't care when they made it. Coppola wanted an excuse to take everyone on a vacation to Italy and just have fun, drinking wine, shooting a movie around that premise, and it really shows in the filmmaking. No one gave a crap. With The Amazing Spider-Man 2, at the time, people did try at least, or they had fun with it. With The Godfather Part 3, no one really had fun making the movie. Al Pacino was too over the top. Sofia Coppola has no top. She is completely bottom, and the way they took the story of moving it to this Italian setting halfway through the film, not caring about the resolution up until the very end, and shoehorning in an ending of Michael just dying in a chair was just an ultimate sign that they didn't care about ending this franchise in a good, meaningful way because it was meant to continue. This film stopped the franchise dead. With Sony, they had plans, but then it was the fans themselves stepping in saying, Marvel, come help them. Marvel, come help them. They could have continued on after The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I was actually, for one, kind of interested in their plans with that teaser ending of the Sinister Six. Whereas after The Godfather Part 3, any hope I had for that franchise continuing was dead because of that movie, because it turned into such a black mark on the franchise.
All right, and once again, a good fight, guys. Just because it was brought up again, I'll just give out the Rotten Tomato scores real fast. Godfather Part 3 had a 67% critic, 78% audience. Amazing Spider-Man 2 had a 52% critic and 64% audience. Other than that, everything else was factually correct within the round. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one to Alex again. I think he did a really good job of explaining why The Godfather Part 3 was a bit of a black mark on the rest of the franchise. And I think he did a decent enough job of defending Amazing Spider-Man 2 against the hits that Malcolm put out against it. Also, there's one kind of like finishing point I was looking for from Malcolm, if we're talking about quality of the film, besides the fact that it was critically well received, was the fact that it had Oscar nominations. And that was not brought up for debate at all during the match, so I can't count that against in or against anyone's favor. So with that, I am going to have to give Alex the victory here. And unfortunately, that does mean Malcolm is knocked out. Alex wins with a knockout. All right. First off, guys, I want to say good match to both of you. But to start, we're going to go ahead and go to Malcolm first for closing thoughts. Malcolm, how you feeling?
I don't feel bad at being knocked out because I knew I was in an uphill battle from the start. I've watched Alex's previous matches. Like to go up against someone who could have been in a championship match is really daunting. And I mean, like I knew I'd lost that last one because I haven't actually seen Godfather Part 3 and just didn't have the time to see it before the match. And like all I can say is I try my best. Alex did better, and that's all I have to say.
No, definitely. Again, and I will continue to say, despite the fact that unfortunately your record right now sits at 1-3, keep in mind that your 3 losses are to Isaac and Alex, who are in the regular rankings, are title contenders, and Evan, who, despite the controversy around it, does have a good record and is the champ. So you can't, despite the, just even taking out the champ part, you can't dispute the fact that Malcolm has played and unfortunately lost to 3 of the best competitors we have out here, All right, and with that, let's go to our victor today. Alex, your record right now after today stands at a record of 3-1 with a knockout. You are moving on to the next round of the tournament, and your next match is going to be against the winner of Chance Ellison versus Jake Marangoni. So you have a possibility of going up against your fellow Full Metal Trivia co-runner. How you feeling about that?
Okay, well, first off, I want to reiterate a point you brought up. This match should not be indicative of how Malcolm is in this league. Yeah, he's 1-3 now, but his 3 losses have been against Isaac, the champ Evan, and myself. 3 championship contenders. And this fight, I would say there was a couple of rounds there, especially that Aardman animation round, where had I missed one point or another, he would have had me on that. I think that is the case. But regardless, Malcolm's record does not belie his skill. He's a very talented player, and with a couple of good fights under his belt against the right opponents, he'll move up in those standings, and he could eventually play for a championship shot. Who knows? Now, as for myself in this game, I'm very happy with the result, obviously. It's my first knockout win. I'm surprised it took me this long. I thought I had it in the DC match. Thanks, Subrath. But beside the point, I got to move on now to potentially play against Chance Ellison. And my God, 2 tournaments going on here in the Worldwide Movie Games where Chance Ellison and I could have to face off in the quarterfinals. It's already going to happen, and there will be trivia happening here in Battleground as well. My God, that is just why? I have to keep fighting the Titan. God damn it! But hey, he's still got his
because
match
if you
to come.
ask commenters, I rig everything.
Well, here's the thing, though. He's got to play Jake, and I've seen Chance and Jake play. I think this is going to be one of the most even matches of the first round, and this is going to be a match that people should watch. Not just because I'll be watching, not just because I got to play the winner, but because I think these 2 competitors have both a point to prove of why they're in this tournament. It's going to be a very interesting match. Overall, though, today, very happy with my performance. My first knockout win. I'm very happy with that I finally got that under my belt. I'm moving on in the tournament, and I am excited to see what happens next.
Definitely. All right, and Malcolm, we'll go to you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on my own personal YouTube channel, Malcolm's Middle Earth Media. You can find me with do Schmodown reactions on there. I've got a short movie that I made myself, and I'm also on Twitter and Letterboxd at Malcor.
All right, and Alex, where can people find you?
Well, as you said at the beginning of the match, of course, you can find me on Full Metal Media here on YouTube and, of course, on Facebook as well. You can find me hosting matches both for Full Metal Trivia and for There Will Be Trivia on the Worldwide Movie Games Network. And, of course, if you want to follow me on social media, it's Alex Worden on Facebook, Alex Worden34 on Twitter. I don't really use Twitter that much, though, so don't worry about that one. But please keep watching, keep subscribing, keep tuned right here to the Worldwide Movie Games Network. There's a lot of great stuff coming up from all 3 of our leagues, and I just want to thank these guys here at Battleground for jumping right into it, and you guys have been awesome since the jump over, and I know you're going to continue to do so, just like us at Full Metal and just like There Will Be Trivia.
Most definitely. With that, you guys can follow me personally on Instagram at Aaron T. Knoll. That's the only real social media that I have. You guys, obviously, if you guys are not a part of the Movie Battleground Facebook page, that's the only way you guys are going to be able to potentially get a match down the road. Now, I preface this every time I say this. We are in a tournament right now. This is going to go for a while, so it's going to be a bit before we can bring some new players in and bring some of the competitors we like who are unfortunately eliminated or out of the tournament back into the game. But if you guys want a shot at playing, you have to be a part of the Movie Battleground Facebook page. So go look us up and join there. If you guys are not a part of the Worldwide Movie Games Network Facebook page and Full Metal Media along with that, go join and support those pages as well. Everybody involved is putting out great content. Like Alex already said, we have 3 shows going on this channel right now. There Will Be Trivia, Full Metal Trivia, and Movie Battleground. All 3 are putting out great content. 2 of them, technically, including the teams, there are 3 different tournaments going on in this channel right now. There's all sorts of great content for you guys to watch and enjoy and play along with potentially, and support every single piece of it because everybody is putting in a lot of hard work and everybody deserves the support that they're, I already think we have a great support base as is, but everything you guys can do to help support us is appreciated and wanted by everyone involved. And if you guys, obviously follow and support all the other admins of Movie Battleground, the previously referenced in loving tone Subrath. We also have Evan DeGraff, Linus Babcock, Matt Beer, Robert Parker. Wow. felt bad that I blanked on names. And of course, the newest admin, Jeremy Hastings. Follow and support all of them. My name is Aaron Knoll, guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the movie Battleground. Everyone, take care.